All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Errol Spence Jr. making an announcement about the Yordenis Ugas fight that should shut down some what I believe to be silly boycott conversations. Let's talk about that in this video. Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. So Errol Spence Jr. took to Twitter today in response to actually a subscriber of mine that is always coming by the channel, saying that they are going to boycott Terence Crawford over the fight that he's having with Yordenis Ugas coming up in the first portion of the year of 2022. And Errol Spence Jr. responds with, "Look, man, I'm not asking you to pay for the fight. The fight's going to be on free TV." So it's going to be real interesting to hear exactly how people are going to boycott a fight that they don't have to pay for, even though you know full well that you're going to pay for the fight. But first, let's talk about the idea of boycotting it at all, even if the fight was on pay-per-view. I know full well that people want to see the Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. fight. Understand that full well. People have been wanting to see that for several years, but there has been a call recently and I don't get why you would boycott a fight between Errol Spence Jr. and Ugas when I have not heard the same people calling for boycotts of pretty much anybody else's fights over the fact that you're not getting a particular fight that you want at the time that you want it. Do not hear about Vasily Lomachenko boycotts. Do not hear anything about let's boycott George Kambosos if he doesn't fight Devin Haney. Let's boycott Canelo Alvarez if Canelo Alvarez doesn't fight Jamal Charlo, right? Never hear all of that stuff, but just for some crazy reason with Errol Spence Jr. as it comes to Terence Crawford, you want to try to come up with some ploy to drive down the man's pay-per-view numbers as if boycotting Errol Spence Jr.'s fight is going to do anything, even if it's successful. If you were successful in boycotting the man's fight, how in the world do you think that that is going to actually help generate a more dangerous fight for him with Terence Crawford? Because people are not going to associate your refusing to watch the fight with Errol Spence Jr. if it's not Terence Crawford as if, oh, okay, well, let's hurry up and make a more dangerous fight that's going to cost more money. No, they're going to interpret it as, wow, Errol Spence Jr.'s dropped off. There's even less money in his fights now, so let's just not put him in there with a difficult opponent. Let's put him in there with an opponent that will cost us less money for us to make our money. The idea of a boycott, even if it was successful, is not going to drive anybody. It's not going to drive an Errol Spence Jr. Fight and Terence Crawford fight to happen that much more quickly. I would think that the more common sense approach to would be for all those people that are such big Terence Crawford fans, that so much so that in their outrage that Errol Spence not fighting him, why don't you guys try buying his pay-per-view fights? Terence Crawford's. Why don't you, instead of going out and saying, let's boycott Terence Crawford, why don't you do a drive to get people to buy Terence Crawford's fights? So Terence Crawford's name can get that much bigger. There's more revenue associated with his fights. And that means that there's that much more likelihood that people are going to actually want to see Terence Crawford fight. Okay? Personally, and I've said this a million times, I do not get it. This is when Errol Spence and Terence Crawford talked and they met each other a couple years ago, and Errol Spence Jr. said what he needed to do to get to the Terence Crawford fight. The man has done exactly what he said he's going to do the entire time. He's kept up his part of bargain. In fact, this fight with Yordenis Ugas is the last step into getting all of the belts that are over that the PBC held into one place, whether that is with Yordenis Ugas or whether that is with Terence Crawford. Errol Spence Jr. drove that, and this is the culmination of him doing what he said he was going to do. I just don't understand why people are so up in arms now about it. They didn't call for a boycott of Errol Spence Jr. when Errol Spence Jr. was going to fight Manny Pacquiao, right? And actually, that fight was one step. That fight wasn't even a step closer to undisputed because he actually had to fight Yordenis Ugas even if he had beaten Manny Pacquiao, or when he had beaten Manny Pacquiao, he still would have had the Yordenis Ugas fight. So I just don't get, man, the selective outrage about Errol Spence Jr. fighting Yordenis Ugas. Terence Crawford has kept his part of the deal. He's gone undefeated. He's beaten every guy that Top Rank gave him to beat, and he beat his mandatory in Sean Porter. So he kept his part of the bargain up. I don't believe that this fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. is going to go another 2 years without it happening. And definitely not going to happen with both of those guys in that weight class for another 2 years. If you want to start boycotting Errol Spence, wait till after Errol Spence Jr., if he's successful with the Yordenis Ugas fight, wait until he then refuses to fight Terence Crawford after that. Because if he has all 3 belts and then he refuses to fight for the 4th belt, you're actually going to have something to stand on when you say somebody is avoiding somebody. But you can't when a guy is fighting for a championship belt. That's just, fact is not a duck. But the boycott kind of gets neutralized when they say this is going to be on free television, because my understanding is that it's going to be on Fox. And now, why would it be free on Fox versus being a pay-per-view on Fox? One thing that I heard was beforehand that Errol Spence Jr. did not want the fight between Sean Porter to be pay-per-view, but with him and Sean Porter to be pay-per-view, but Sean Porter wanted it to be pay-per-view. And since Sean Porter wanted it to be pay-per-view, he wouldn't take the fight until it became pay-per-view, which increased his the amount of money that he's going to make. Yordenis Ugas, it seems, is probably not pushing back on Errol Spence Jr.'s wish for the fight not to be on pay-per-view. So but just to ask a question, how many people would you know that are at the level of Errol Spence Jr. that would push for a fight not to be on pay-per-view and push for the fight to be on regular TV so that more people can watch the fight? Because unless he's going back to Showtime, Errol Spence Jr. fights on Fox. This is just free, which is free as long, and everybody has. That's not a subscription-based network, Fox. So I think Errol Spence Jr. is doing even more to bring visibility to his name when he's fighting Yordenis Ugas by having it on free TV. Sounds like a plan to me, and not something necessarily that should be boycotted. Something that should be commended, right? Because not a lot of people are doing that. Everybody that I know of is pretty much pushing to try to become pay-per-view and trying to get as much money as they can out of fans. As much money as they can out of the fans. So shoot, my hat goes off to Errol Spence Jr. for pushing for the fight to be free TV. Now, obviously, the fight hasn't been announced as free TV, so we got to keep eyes looking out for that. But honestly, man, I like it. Now, I've been saying though that the reason why the fight this particular fight can be free and not on pay-per-view is because obviously Fox is willing to invest the money in Errol Spence Jr. and in Yordenis Ugas to be able to cover whatever reasonable amount of money that they want to make. And Errol Spence is probably okay with the guarantee that he can get from Fox, or okay with the guarantee that he can get with Showtime, and isn't being greedy, right? So, man, dude, I'd be really interested to see how many people are going to want to boycott a free fight. I don't think it's going to go very far. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out.